How's it going, Diablo fans? Today I will show you my first Abattoir of Zir build guide. I just want to make one thing very clear. A lot of this is still based on assumptions because the content hasn't been released yet, but my assumption is that we need to build defensive for this content, and that's why I make this build incredibly defensive, so it's definitely not going to do peak damage like all the ball lightning builds out there will do, but it's going to be incredibly defensive, and that's why I'm gonna paint your screen with defensive abilities right now, so you can see we actually stack more than 250% damage reduction, we have maximum armor, and we have an incredible high life pool, we have incredible barrier, and we just will not die, period. With the campfire, we have already seen that Abattoir of Zir doesn't seem to be a DPS check. It is more like a utility or survivability check. So the dungeons do not have objectives, right? So you just gotta kill mobs. You don't have to run very fast movement speed for whatever reason. You just go from pack to pack and kill them, and at the end it spawns 3 Bloodseekers. So the dungeon also does not have any bosses. So it is really just plain survive the dungeon, kill enough mobs, and finish it. And my assumption is there's going to be some kind of a farming phase where you go to like a level which you are comfortable farming with, which is probably somewhere between like level 5 and 15. I don't know yet, because we don't know how much damage the new glyph will actually do, but my assumption is it's somewhere in this range, right? So let's say your comfortable farming will be level 10 or whatever. Then you're gonna spend a significant time farming the level 10s to level up your glyph. So we don't know what affixes those dungeons have. We have to pretty much play them like no matter how bad they are. They can have suppressors, they can have death pulls, they can have Stormbane's Rest, they can have really all the terrible mods, and we still have to play them. Yes, of course you can build a face roll ball lightning build and just hope you get through, but the reality would probably be you're just gonna die from random stuff, right? And if you're dead, the dungeon is over, the sigil powder is wasted, the time is wasted, and you're literally not gonna get any reward whatsoever. So my focus here definitely is gonna be, I don't wanna die. So this is why I crafted this build to be incredibly tanky and defensive. Like you can tank death pulls, you can get hit by the corpse bow or whatever. Like you will survive. That is the most important for me, because I don't wanna die in the middle of the run and then have to start over again. That's just totally annoying, and I am more than happy to sacrifice kill speed to not die in this new content. So again, before we go into the detailed guide, I'm just going to quickly explain the synergies and the defensiveness of this build, why it's still doing a lot of damage. You can always check the description down below. I have links to the planner and links to the specific sections of this guide, as well as links to all my other build guides there. And starting with this build, I just want to sum up like the defensive stats. So we are going to have, like, let's just make it 250% plus damage reduction. We're gonna have at least 10,500 armor unbuffed. If you have good armor rolls on your armor pieces, you can easily reach like 11,500 unbuffed without disobedience. We're going to have 16k life or more unbuffed, and we're going to have additional defensive capabilities on top of it. Because we are running basic skill with Spark Unstable Currents, our goal here is to have 100% uptime on Unstable Currents. And while Unstable Currents is up, we are technically not immortal, but we are not gonna die. Because what we do is we use the protection passive, and together with our 5 attacks per second basic skill attack speed, which is by the way the highest attack speed breakpoint reachable, and with the aspect of overwhelming currents, we are going to spawn a very, very high amount of lightning spares during unstable currents. First of all, lightning spares incredibly boost our damage using Conjuration Mastery, but also casting a lightning spare actually counts as using a cooldown. So together with the protection passive and our high base life pool, we have a permanent barrier which is essentially refreshing multiple times per second, right? So every time you spawn a lightning spare, the barrier gets refreshed. And you're not gonna get out of this barrier, and even if the barrier is broken, you can still add it to your effective life pool, and then we are still using the Undying Vampiric Power, which gives us 3% heal for every spell we cast, and we are going to cast 5 spells per second. So that's 15% life leech every second if we're above 50%, and if we're below 50% life, that's even 30% life leech every second. So you can face tank groups of mobs with unstable currents, no problem. And the build aims to have unstable current active all the time. So we use a lot of cooldown reduction on all of our gear pieces. We use the Tarasha ring as well as the X-Force Corroded Signet, and those rings also both have cooldown reduction on them, which is a stat you would normally not be able to get on a ring. And then we use the Hectic Vampiric Power for additional cooldown reduction because we are casting basic skills at a very high attack rate. And on top of that, we use the Overflowing Energy key passive, which is going to reduce our cooldowns even further. So we really will not have any issues having 100% uptime on unstable currents, and as long as we stand still and spam Spark, unstable currents is going to be up right after it ends again. So we are totally geared for long fights versus elite packs. So if we really need to do long fights, especially against the 3 bosses at the end, for example, if they have terrible affixes, we should be able to get that done no problem without having to worry about those mobs becoming unstoppable and just one-hitting us. That was the quick introduction for this build. I'm sorry it went a little bit long because in general I wanted to talk a little bit more about Abattoir of Zir, but now make sure to check the description down below and all the specific sections of this guide, and also at the very end I will leave full Nightmare Dungeon footage where you can see how tanky this build really is. And now let's get into the detailed sections of this guide, and as always we will start with the skill tree. Alrighty, let's do the skill tree. So we put 1 point into Firebolt just because we're using the Firebolt enchantment here, and then we put 1 point into Spark, 1 point into Enhanced Spark, and 1 point into Glinting Spark. This gives us another 8% critical strike chance, which is a really nice buff for a basic skill we are using anyway. And then we put 1 point into Devastation and 3 points into Elemental Dominance. Since we are just using basic skills, we are above 50 mana all of the time. Then we put 1 point into Charge Bolts, 1 into Enhanced Charge Bolts, and 1 into Destructive Charge Bolts. This gives us a nice 25% damage reduction for the harder fights we do. Then we put 1 point into Flame Shield and 1 point into Teleport. I don't have Shaku at this moment. If you have Shaku, you can redistribute these 2 points, right? And we will get to where to distribute them later. I'm not using Glass Cannon at this point. We don't know how defensive we have to go for Abattoir of Zir, so for now, I'm just not using it. Like, you can later spec into Glass Cannon if it might fit the build, if you can, you know, if you feel like you have enough survivability and you can go into Glass Cannon, no problem. I just leave it out for now because I feel like I don't need it damage-wise, and I don't want to have the additional damage taken here. Then we still put 1 point into Elemental Attunement to reset our Flame Shield, 3 points into Precision Magic for the lucky hit chance. Then we max out Align the Elements. Align the Elements is really nice additional damage reduction. Like, usually, for example, if you get hit by an elite corpse bow, like, you have the 40% damage reduction up. So I would highly recommend not to just put 1 point in here, but put all 3 points into this. We are not using Mana Shield since we are not spending a lot of mana. This would be a waste. And then Protection is our primary barrier generator, and together with Lightning Spear, which is spawned by unstable currents, Lightning Spear actually, as already said, counts as using a cooldown. So whenever you spawn a Lightning Spear using unstable currents, you will actually trigger Protection and refresh your barrier. So this gives you 100% uptime on a very strong barrier. So for Lightning Spear, we take Enhanced Lightning Spear and Invoke Lightning Spear so it stuns everything. Then we get 3 points into Conjuration Mastery, and you want to have +3 on your Amulet if possible. This gives you the most amount of damage from your Amulet slot. If you don't have it, you can also go Devouring Blaze, which is fine. It's going to be a little bit weaker, but you can still play it. But I highly recommend going for Conjuration Mastery if you can. Then we put 1 point into Inner Flames and 3 points into Devouring Blaze. Then we max out Ball Lightning with Enhanced Ball Lightning and Wizard's Ball Lightning. So Ball Lightning is still going to be doing major damage in this build. I'm not going to argue about that. Then 3 points into Static Discharge, just for some more crackling energy. You could probably redistribute these points as well if you feel like Ball Lightning is doing enough with Wizard's Ball Lightning. You can probably take 2 points out of this and redistribute them somewhere else. 1 point into Permafrost, 3 points into Hoarfrost. This gives us another 9 to 18% damage because we are using Blizzard on the harder packs all the time, so this is going to be active. Then we put 1 point into Unstable Currents, 1 point into Prime Unstable Currents, and 1 point into Supreme Unstable Currents. This time we pick Supreme Unstable Currents because our key passive here is Overflowing Energy, so this helps with maintaining 100% uptime on Unstable Currents. And then we put 3 points into Causing Currents just for some extra critical strike chance. 3 points into Electrocution for the damage reduction. And I just have a spare point here into Conduction. We use Unstable Currents. We try to reach as low as possible cooldown. I have 38 seconds. You can probably go down to like 35 seconds if you have perfect cooldown reduction rolls, but this is alright. So as long as you're around like the 40, you will have permanent Unstable Currents. It's gonna work, trust me. The second slot, I have Hydra on. This slot is completely optional. You can put there whatever you like. You could, for example, also put Ball Lightning there and spec into Invigorating Conduit. Like, if you, for whatever reason, feel like casting Ball Lightning manually in certain situations is gonna give you more damage, all you don't want to do is don't put a cooldown here. Like, don't put Frost Armor here, because it's going to significantly lower your uptime on Unstable Currents, because we use the Hectic Vampiric Power to reduce a random skill's cooldown by 2 seconds. So if you put another skill here, you will reduce another skill's cooldown, and that's gonna not be very good. So in this build right now, I don't really have anything else to use, so I just use Hydra because it gives me 6% multiplicative damage together with Conjuration Mastery, and I can just plant it, and it lasts for 12 seconds, so no problem, right? Teleport is just for getting around faster, like always. Flame Shield is your main defensive ability here, so you want to use it as much as possible. Basically, most of the time you use it into stronger elite fights. Don't use it on like non-elite mobs, because whenever you use Flame Shield, you increase the cooldown on Unstable Currents, because whenever Flame Shield is on cooldown, your Hectic Vampiric Power will also reduce the cooldown on Flame Shield, and you don't want to do that. So really just use Flame Shield when you really need it. If you don't need it, you will get like to know when you need it, when you not need it in this build. Like usually while you have Unstable Currents on it, unless there's like something really, really severe hitting you, you're not gonna need it at all. Then we use Spark. Spark is our basic skill with a very high attack speed, and that is solely used to spawn stuff out of Unstable Currents. And Blizzard, we just use it for the chilled and frozen synergy here. So just plant it on elites or plant it on yourself if you're like in melee, and it's gonna enable those synergies. That's all it is for. And we also have enough spare skill slots, so it's no big deal to use it. And furthermore, it gives you 15% damage increase with the Tal Rasha's Ring in. And as our enchantments, we use Firebolt enchantment. It triggers the X-Faults, it enables Burning Synergy, so that's pretty much it. And the second enchant here is Ball Lightning enchantment. This still does a great amount of damage, especially if you can get a Shaco. You can get much more damage out of Ball Lightning. At this point, I guess it would be pointless to even try to go through Abattoir of Zir with anything but Ball Lightning doing like major parts of the damage here. For the legendary aspects, we start with the offensive ones again. So we use the Stormswell aspect for 30% multiplicative damage increase. Then we use the Conceited aspect for another 25. We use the Rapid aspect for more basic skill attack speed. We want to reach the breakpoint of 5 basic skills per second. So you cannot reach more than 5 basic skills per second, and you will reach 5 basic skills per second at around 185% attack speed bonus. If you're interested in that, I have a video where I actually prove that you cannot reach more than 5 attacks per second, and I put the link in the description down below, so just check it out if you're interested, or you can just believe me that 185% attack speed bonus is going to be the cap. That's why we're not running Accelerating Aspect in this build, because we don't need it, because we are already at this cap, right? So, and then as our last offensive aspect, we use Overwhelming Currents to get 30% more cast out of Unstable Currents on our amulet. Since we want to have Unstable Currents active all the time, this is simply the strongest modificator we can get on our amulet here. Then for unique items, we use the X-Force Corroded Signet. We pretty much just use this for the cooldown reduction here, because we want to have a high cooldown reduction. If you feel like you don't need it, or if Abattoir of Zir turns out to have like a lot of elite packs with very, very high hit point elites, the overflowing energy will probably be enough to get rid of like 10, maybe even 20% cooldown reduction. For now, I just assume I still need this cooldown reduction. If you don't need this cooldown reduction, you can definitely go for an offensive ring with crit chance, lucky hit, and another offensive aspect, like for example, aspect of control or edge masters. But for now, I'm going in with X-Force here. Tarasha's ring is pretty much a no-brainer. You're gonna use it no matter what, right? This is the strongest ring in the game for Sorceress. It gives, in this build, 45% multiplicative damage. It gives cooldown reduction. It gives non-physical damage. Okay, we don't need the resource generation, the basic skill, but this is simply like the greatest ring you can get. And then for our defensive aspects, we are getting the aspect of might. This is 20% damage reduction after casting a basic skill. Don't need to explain that we cast basic skills all the time here, right? Then we get Disobedience, strongest defensive aspect. We don't need it on our amulet. We already have, as you can see, 10.6k base armor here. So we're gonna end up with more than 15,000 if we are buffed. So really, we don't need Disobedience on our amulet here right now. If it turns out that maybe later in higher levels of Abattoir of Zir we need it, we can adjust it, but for now, I don't need it. And then last but not least, I'm taking the Ever-Living aspect for another 25% damage reduction here. And as you can see, I'm not using any uniques or uber uniques in these slots. If you have Shaco, use Shaco. The planner in the description down below has 2 gear set variants. One is with Shaco, one is without, so just make sure to check that out. The only unique we are using on top of this here is Asus. We just need the crit chance. I don't see like any valid reason for using like Flicker Step. I feel like this basic skill build is just giving us perma unstable currents anyway, and Asus is then simply just like a 30% permanent crit chance, and that is just like so mandatory for every build. Okay, let's go through items and stat priorities. So as always, you will find a link to the dream items and dream stats in the planner link in the description down below. So first of all, just a quick note, I don't have Shaco at this moment. If you have Shaco, you're going to use Shaco. If you don't have Shaco, you're going to use a helm with basic skill attack speed, total armor, maximum life, and cooldown reduction. So these are the perfect stats if you don't have Shaco. If you have Shaco, you use Shaco. Then for your armor, again, you use total armor, maximum life, damage reduction, and damage reduction from burning would be the perfect stat here. I have damage reduction from distant, which is also not bad, but best you can get is definitely damage reduction from burning. Then on your gloves, you want to use intelligence, attack speed, critical strike chance, lucky hit chance. Simply, you don't need any plus skills in this, and intelligence, it just gives you like 5% extra damage, though this is pretty much a no-brainer. You don't need any other roll on your gloves. Then for the pants, same than chest piece, total armor, maximum life, damage reduction from burning, and ball lightning ranks. So this one is not perfect. Probably would be better to have 4 to ball lightning, but anyway, like this is still a pretty good piece, I guess. Well, for Asus, aim for at least 25% movement speed and at least 25% increased critical strike chance, I would say. For your wand, nothing special, right? All stats, intelligence, damage to burning, and vulnerable damage is probably the best one you can get here. Then we put in emeralds here. For your focus, perfect stats would be basic skill attack speed, cooldown reduction, critical strike chance, and damage reduction from burning. So this one is not as great, but again, I'm min-maxing here, and this gem here is actually wrong, right? You want to have an emerald in here as well. Then for your amulet, the best amulet you can get is cooldown reduction, maximum intelligence, mastery skills, and conjuration mastery. If you use Shaco, the best amulet would be cooldown reduction, total armor percentage, mastery skills, and conjuration mastery. So if you don't have Shaco, use percent intelligence. If you have Shaco, use total armor. Pretty much it. Then for your rings, you want to focus on the highest cooldown reduction roll and the highest lucky hit chance. The damage roll on here doesn't matter. For Tarashas, again, highest cooldown reduction and try to get as high as possible of the unique stat here. The other stats are not so important. Lucky hit chance is nice to have. Resource generation, we don't care at all. For our Vampiric Powers, we want to get a Curse Touch and Prey on the Weak combination to get Vulnerable up and running. In this build, we definitely need access to Vulnerable, and this combination pretty much makes everything vulnerable almost instantly. So these two are completely mandatory. Then we want to have Ravenous for the attack speed. This one is also absolutely mandatory. Then Hectic is for reducing our ultimate cooldown. Also, this is going to be mandatory. And then the last node is not mandatory. So this again depends on the difficulty on Abattoir of Zir. I right now use Undying because I think it's going to be required. If you don't have to use Undying because the difficulty is not that hard, then I would probably go for Sanguine Embrace here for extra 10% damage reduction and extra 8% critical strike chance. This would be a good option. You could also go for Infection for the extra Tal Russia stack. You could go for Anticipation if you're having trouble with keeping your ultimate up and running. But this is pretty much the options you have here. All the other stuff I would pretty much disregard. This Paragon board is highly focused on defenses, so I really try to get everything damage reduction wise I can get. I try to get a lot of maximum life, and I cap out my resistances. So this is because the assumption that we need a lot of damage reduction going into Abattoir of Zir. If it's not going to be that terrible, you can definitely switch out some of the more defensive glyphs, and you can also probably like switch this Paragon board to be more offensive. I might do adjustments then later when Abattoir of Zir actually gets released, but this is going to be the Paragon board I will start with, and this is very highly defensive based. So in the beginning, I again pick all these maximum life and resistance nodes here, also these ones here, and I put in the Elementalist glyph. I pretty much always do this in the first board, since this gives me a 15% extra damage and also greatly boosts the rare nodes around. Then let's go into the next board. That's going to be the Enchantment Master. This is still a purely damage-focused board, right? We just get the non-physical damage everywhere. We get the resistances here and the non-physical damages here. And we put in our Tactician glyph for another 10% damage increase and also to boost our resistances even further. And next board is going to be the Burning Instinct board. Here we already start with defenses. So we get these damage reduction nodes, we get the damage nodes. We put in our control glyph. So Abattoir of Zir is not going to have bosses. And this, well, we basically have three primary conditions. We have chilled, we have stunned, and we have frozen. So stunned is pretty much going to be most of the time enemies are going to be stunned from our lightning spears. So this, for the most time, will give us a 20% damage increase. Blizzard will sometimes make them frozen, but it's not going to happen all that much. And it's always going to be chilled. So this is either 10% or 20%. And it also 14.9% per dexterity is the highest additive damage you can pretty much get here. That's why I'm using control in this build. Then I pick up more damage here in the middle. And we pick up all these damage reduction and armor nodes here. Then let's go over to the next board. That is going to be the Icefall board. We pick Icefall because it has a lot of damage reduction from chilled. So if we encounter hard elite packs, we're just gonna put Blizzard on them. They're gonna to be chilled, and then we're gonna get all these nice bonuses here. So there's like this node gives like 27% damage reduction. It's like totally crazy. Then, you know, all these small nodes give 3%. There's more of these 3%, so there's 6 total of them. There's another 12% here. And it also gives some nice damage to chilled bonus, because we can use our reinforced glyph here to boost the rare nodes, and the reinforced glyph itself gives us another 15% damage reduction while we have an active barrier, and we're going to have a barrier active all the time. So let's move over to the actual last board. So we're playing one board less in this build because we just need to pick up so many defensive nodes, and we simply cannot get it done without picking like one board less than we would usually pick. So the last board is going to be Frigid Fate. Frigid Fate we use for the multiplicative damage increase here to all skills. And we use the damage reduction here. If you have Shaco, you can easily reach another 5% damage reduction here. I don't have Shaco yet. I hope I can still find it before Abattoir of Zir hits. But you can get another 5% out of this if you have Shaco and good all stats rolls. Then we pick up all the damage reduction nodes here again. We pick up the vulnerable damage here. And then we put in our Conjurer glyph with 40 intelligence. We pretty much just need this for the 20% increased duration. There's options that you could, for example, use Flame Feeder for 10% multiplicative damage and also some more additive damage. I just feel like the 20% increased duration from the Conjurer together with the Conjuration Mastery gives far more multiplicative damage than any other glyph would do. And yes, we lose out on some additive damage because conjuration skill damage really doesn't matter at all, but I still feel like this is the best option. If you don't like this, you can put in like Flame Feeder, for example, or you could go for Exploit, like all have good multiplicative damage bonuses, but I choose the Conjurer glyph here. And then, again, we pick up the lucky hit chance here, so nothing special about that. And this is like a relatively small Paragon board, so that's pretty much already it. So this is strongly defensive focused. Remember, this is going to be the start board going into Abattoir of Zir. If we don't need the defenses, we will make a new Paragon board. We will put more damage in it, no problem, right? Okay, this is going to be it for this guide. I hope you find it useful. I have a very good feeling about this build going into Abattoir of Zir, and this is definitely going to be my starting build. And I will also post updates to this build when I put in the actual Tears of Blood glyph. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check everything in the description down below, and make sure to follow my upcoming builds for Abattoir of Zir. And that's going to be it for me. Thank you so much for watching again, and I see you guys next time.